Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I will break down the tight end position and defensive special team position for Week 5 of the NFL. If you're like me, the tight end position through the first 4 weeks of the NFL has probably proved to be elusive at best in trying to find the right tight end for your DFS lineup. The best way to describe this is to just jump right in and give you a look back at Week 4. The top 5 projected tight ends in Week 4 were Ingram, Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, and Olsen. Compare this to the actual top 5 scoring, which were Hooper from Atlanta, who scored 25, Disley from Seattle, who scored 18.70, Ricky Seals-Jones from Cleveland, who scored 17.20, Kelsey from Kansas City, who scored 15.50, and Everett from the Rams scored 15.40. In Week 4, only 6.5 points separated the number 5 tight end from the number 15 tight end. As I mentioned, the elusiveness of the tight end position requires consideration of many different factors to try to get an edge in deciding which one to fit into your lineup. I use the following to break down the numbers and build my lineups. I look at the game totals. I'm looking for the games that have the higher totals because these are the games that are probably going to have the players needed to do the scoring for them to be high totals. For the tight end as well as wide receiver, I look at targets. I think targets are a really good indicator to give you an edge when you're selecting your tight end. I consider the matchup. I look for red zone targets. Red zone's really important because it's very difficult to predict or project touchdowns. With red zone targets, it kind of gives you an edge. At least you know they're being targeted when their team does get down in the red zone. I consider value, and then later in the week I start looking at ownership to see if I can find a way to gain leverage on the field. If people are spending up, then perhaps I'll spend down. If people are spending down, maybe I'll spend up at the tight end position. When looking at the top 5 tight ends in Week 4, we find that the average between the 5 of them was 7.2 targets. They averaged a score of 18.36 points, which comes out to 2.55 points per target with all things relevant. That's touchdowns, yards, receptions, fumbles. That's all factored in. And remember, that's 2.55 per target, not per reception. I feel that identifying the tight ends who are heavily targeted gives you a chance at least to project what's known as expected fantasy points. The top targeted tight ends through the first 4 weeks. Now, I want to make sure I make this clear on the main slate. So the tight ends I'm going to be discussing today are on the main slate. That means I don't include the games, the primetime games, the Thursday night, Sunday night, or Monday night games. So with that being said, the top targeted tight ends through the first 4 weeks are Ertz with 38 targets. That's 9.5 targets per game. He scored 51.50 points. Ingram has 37 targets. That's 9.25 targets per game. He scored 72.10 fantasy points. Waller from Oakland, 37 targets, 9.25 a game, and he scored 65.70 points. Hooper from Atlanta has 33 targets through 4 games. That's 8.25 per game, and he scored 70.70 fantasy points. And Olsen has 29 targets through the first 4 games. That's 7.25 targets a game, and he scored 52.60 points. Now I break that down even further. These top 5 average 8.7 targets a game. That's those 5. Their average score is 15.63, and that comes out to 1.80 fantasy points per target. That's why identifying targets is really, really critical with the tight end, because you cannot predict or project touchdowns. So targets generate receptions, generate yards, and that's what the top five per target are getting right now. Now, again, the actual top scoring tight ends with all things relevant are Ingram was 72.10, Hooper was 70.70, Andrews from Baltimore was 67.60, Waller from the Raiders was 65.70, Olsen from Carolina with 52.60, and if you average those together, the top five scoring are averaging 16.44 points a game. Four of those top five scoring are also in the top five targeted. Again, touchdowns have so much unpredictability that they are impossible to predict. But one indicator that can shed some light is red zone targets. The following tight ends are receiving the most red zone targets through the first 4 weeks of the NFL. Ertz from Philadelphia has received 6 targets inside the 20-yard line. One of those was inside the 10. Ingram from the Giants has received 5 inside the 20-yard line. 3 of the 5 were inside the 10. Andrews from Baltimore has received 5 inside the 20. 3 of those were inside the 10. Witten from the Cowboys has received 5 inside the 20. 4 of the 5 have been inside the 10-yard line. And Graham from the Packers has received 5 inside the 20, and 4 of those 5 were inside the 10. Should mention that Hooper from Atlanta, Walker from Tennessee, Eifert from Cincinnati, O'Shaughnessy from Jacksonville, and Hurst, the other tight end for Baltimore, they've all received 4 targets inside the 20. And Eifert from Cincinnati has 3 of his 4 targets have actually been inside the 10. So Dalton is looking for him when they're inside the red zone and down inside the 10-yard line. Some of the same names appear in most of the statistical categories, so looking at matchups is another way to identify the higher scoring tight ends. In week 5, the worst defenses against the tight end position are the following. Arizona, number 32, they're giving up 23.8 points per game to the tight end position. This week, they face Cincinnati's Eifert. Tampa Bay is number 31. They're giving up 15.9 points per game. This week, they're going to face New Orleans and Cook. That's a huge drop-off from Arizona at 23.8 points to Tampa Bay, 15.9. Oakland is number 29. They're giving up 13.6 points per game. This weekend they play Chicago, and they'll be facing Trey Burton. Tennessee is number 28. They're giving up 13.1 points per game. This weekend they're going to face the Buffalo Bills and I believe he's a rookie, his last name is Knox, at the tight end position. And number 25 is the Los Angeles Chargers. They're giving up 11.5 points per game. This weekend they're going to be facing Denver and Ricky Fant. Now, when you look at the ones that are worst, you also want to consider the ones that are the best. And this is the teams that are doing the best against the tight end through the first 4 weeks. Number 1, the New York Jets. They're giving up 3.5 points per game. This week they face off against Philadelphia's Ertz. That'll be very interesting because Ertz is at the top of the charts in targets, red zone. He's the top tight end. Looking at Draftkings at $6,000. So, and with the Jets being number 1, that's going to be really interesting. Thing to remember though is Philadelphia actually employs 2 tight ends, so this may be a game where Goddard does some damage. Number 2 is Buffalo. They're giving up 3.5 points per game. This week they're going to face Tennessee and Delaney Walker. Number 3 is Houston. They're giving up 4 points per game. And this weekend they get Atlanta's Hooper. That's another really interesting matchup. Hooper's done really well through the first 4 weeks. He's in the top 5 in a lot of the categories, so that'll be really interesting. It might force Ryan to look to his other targets. New England is number 4. They're giving up 4.7 points per game. This week they face Washington and Vernon Davis. And Carolina is number 5. They're giving up 5 points per game to the tight end position. This weekend they're going to face off against Jacksonville and O'Shaughnessy and Swain. Okay, now that you think I've made a big mess of all this, and you're thinking, how in the world do you put all that together? No worries. I'm going to sum it all up for you and tell you the tight ends that I'm going to target and why, using the information that I just broke down with you. These are the tight ends I'm going to target. Eifert from Cincinnati. He's $3,300. Arizona is the worst against the tight end at giving up 23.8 points per game. Game script should favor a passing game with the way that Arizona runs plays, a lot of plays in the game, which means the other team gets a lot of plays as well. You see a situation in Eifert, and he is getting a lot of targets inside the red zone. Value at $3,300 compared to some of the higher ones like Ingram and Ertz. The question with Eifert is, everybody knows that Arizona is really bad against the tight end, which may drive his ownership up. One thing that might drive his ownership down is everybody's seen that game Monday night where Cincinnati was just absolutely, I don't know what that was, a pee-wee football team or something, but so that'll be interesting, and I'll be looking at that tomorrow when I do the lineup building video, as I'm going to be looking at the ownership, what the projected ownership is, and he could be a really nice value at $3,300. Next is Ingram from the Giants. He's the second most expensive this week at $5,800. He's getting 9.25 targets a game. He's the number 1 scoring tight end at 18.02 points per game. He's been in the Millie Maker on Draftkings 2 of the 4 contests. And there might be some value based on ownership. If everyone, I mentioned this earlier in this video, a lot of times if everyone's spending up to get to like Kelsey or Ertz, then I'll spend down. If everybody's spending down, I might spend up. So the ownership will tell a lot, and Ingram is definitely one that should be considered week in and week out. Cook is number 3 from New Orleans. He's $3,400, $100 more than Eifert. Tampa Bay is giving up 15.9 points per game to the tight end. This game has a 47-point game total, one of the highest on the slate. Game script should favor a passing attack by New Orleans because Tampa Bay is coming in number 1 or number 2 against the run. And he could be one of the forgotten tight ends with everyone kind of concentrating on Eifert and Ingram. Cooks could go unnoticed down there. He's had few issues with dropping the ball, but he might be a nice value sitting there at $3,400. And I will look at his ownership. I will look at all their ownerships and tell you what I find tomorrow when I do the lineup building video. $4,000 for Olsen from Carolina. He's getting 7.25 targets per game. The game script could be favorable, meaning if Jacksonville shuts down the running attack of McCaffrey, but that's one thing you have to consider. McCaffrey gets a tremendous amount of targets, but it looks like Allen favors Olsen. In his first couple games, he's relied on Olsen. And he could be a pretty good value at $4,000 compared to spending up for like Ertz or Ingram. So I'm going to have Olsen in the player pool as well. Number 5, Waller from Oakland. He's getting 9.25 targets per game. He's facing a very tough defense. Game script could be favorable if the Bears were able to jump out to a lead. A lot of people might be afraid to use him against the Bears. they're middle of the field against the tight end position. You could see a situation where a game where maybe even some garbage time Carr, getting a lot of dump offs to Waller, and he's been targeting him a ton. He's in the top 5 in a lot of the categories, so I'm definitely going to consider him. And I think because he's playing against the Bears, that'll scare away a lot of people. So he might be pretty good value off the others. And if everyone's spending down, he might, instead of going all the way up. I'm not crazy about his price, but 5,000 is doable. And number 6, Andrews from Baltimore. He's averaging 16.990 points per game. He's getting red zone targets. Game script with Pittsburgh could favor an up and down game. And he's $4,800. And with the amount of targets he's getting, it would be, I'm definitely going to consider him in the player pool. And of course, you always have to consider Ertz. He's 6,000. He's most expensive on here. I don't think personally I'm going to get up to Ertz this week. The Jets are number 1 against the tight end, and I don't know with some of the other players that I'm interested in if it's possible to get up to him. And as I said, I don't know that I want to take that chance with the Jets. Now, it could be really contrarian, too. Everyone could be thinking the same thing that I am. Like, do I really want to get up to Ertz? And the Jets are so good against the tight end, and everybody stays off of him and spins down and drops down to Eifert and Waller and forget about Ertz at the top, and then he goes off with some spectacular game with Wentz. So have to see what the ownership is with him as well. He's getting 9.5 targets per game. He's number 1 in red zone targets with 6. And the only bad thing is that $6,000 salary. Kelsey, when he's been on the main slate, he's been right around 7,200, 7,100 each week. And Ertz really hasn't had that one. Let me look here real quick. I don't think he's had a really good breakout game. It didn't. Give me 1 second here. Let's take a quick look at Zach Ertz. His game log. Green Bay, he scored 13 fantasy points. He had 8 targets for 65 yards. Detroit, he had 7 targets for 64 yards for 10 points. Atlanta, he had 16. Wow, Atlanta has 16 targets for 72 yards. And Washington, he had 7 targets for 54 yards. He's not scored a touchdown this year either. He's had targets inside the red zone. He just hasn't scored a touchdown. He sat at 6 inside the 20. Only one of them was inside the 10. So he'll be one to consider, and it'll be solely based on ownership and if you can be contrarian by taking him. So summing up the tight ends, these are the tight ends I'm going to be targeting in the player pool. Eifert from Cincinnati, Ingram from the Giants, Cook from New Orleans, Olsen from Carolina, Waller from Oakland, Andrews from Baltimore, and Ertz from Philadelphia. Again, I'll watch ownership to see if I can get some leverage when I'm choosing any player, leverage or value. And I will be addressing this in all the other positions tomorrow on the lineup building video. Okay, now I want to look at the defensive special teams position. I have said this in previous videos. I personally don't believe in punting any position. Some people will just scroll down, and people I know when they're building to just scroll down, you could take a huge chance on the Redskins this week at 1,800, and they might get a defensive. 2 weeks ago, the Jets got pretty much demolished by New England, and but the Jets were the highest scoring defense that week was 16 points because they got two returns for a touchdown. See, I mean, you never know. That's not the strategy that I use. I research every position, break them down, try to find an edge, try to find leverage, match up ownership. I don't MME. I don't do the mass multi entries. Um, I'm not in the financial position to do that. I don't have anything against guys that are able to do that. I mean, if I could, I probably would. I'd get a player pool, throw them all in an optimizer, and see what see what it spits out. I try to build the best lineups that I can. I do use an optimizer to build about 20 lineups, and I use the player pool that I have, plug them in to get some randomization and build lineups like that. I play a lot of different contests, but I don't put more than I don't. I've never played 150 lineups, and I have won two GPPs. One had over 29,000, and the other one had over 20,000. One of them was after 4 o'clock only NFL, and both of those, one of them I only had one entry in it, and the other one only had two entry. It's hard to do, but like I said, I try to do the research and break it down, and I'm not willing to punt any position. So with that being said, with the defensive special teams, I'm looking at matchups, value, game script. I do consider the lower scoring games, the games that have the lower totals. I'm looking for the favorites. I'm looking for the big favorites. If Vegas thinks the team is going to be a big favorite, then you can see the scenario that they're going to be ahead, which means the other team's probably going to have to throw the ball to catch up at some point. And throwing the ball around, all kinds of things can go bad. I mean, it sets up sacks, it sets up interceptions, it sets up interception for touchdowns, all kinds of things. So that's why I look for the favorites as well. I like home favorites especially. So with that being said, these are going to be the defenses that I'm going to target this week, and I'm going to tell you why. Philadelphia, they're $3,700. They're at home. They're a huge favorite. Low total. They're facing a rookie quarterback. I believe Falk's a rookie quarterback. Let's look here real quick. I meant to look at that earlier. I apologize. Falk. Yeah. Services. Yeah, it's like this. What Darno see? Falk is the only healthy quarterback, so it comes with a 2018 6th-round pick. Okay, who was signed off the practice squad. So he's been in the league a year. But back to Philadelphia. I did see him in the game where he had to come in from Simeon, and I could see that from that game, um, there could definitely be some problems with if Philadelphia can get some pressure on him. And Philadelphia could be a nice pivot off of New England. New England scored a lot of defensive points in a couple games. This week 2, I believe it was, they scored 37, 30. Let's see. Let's look at this game log. Week 2 they scored 37 points, and last week they scored 25 points. They're averaging 20 points a game defense, and so Philly might be a nice pivot off of them. Like I said, they check the boxes that I like. They're home. They're a big favorite. Low total going against an inexperienced quarterback, and $3,700. The next defense I'm interested in are the Chargers. They're only $2,700. They're at home. They're a favorite. It's a low total. There's some value at 2,700, and the game total 44.5. I I just have a feeling about them maybe getting some pressure on Flacco, and I like that they're a home favorite, and I think Denver's a different team when they're away from uh, home, and that's a really nice price, and I mean it's 1,000 less than the Eagles. $3,800. The Bears, they're a favorite. They're playing in England. They're averaging 13 points per game on defense. They're $500 cheaper than New England, and with them being in England, I can see a scenario where the Bears kind of get forgotten this week, and it's also Khalil Mack's revenge game from being traded from there. So you might want to show Gruden what he give up. So I'm definitely going to consider them. Hey, you have to consider the top uh, team. Excuse me, New England. They're $4,300. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get up to that. And I have a philosophy about the defenses that are 4,300, 4,700, or whatever. That's a player. Um, that's a position player salary. And if they don't get that defensive return for a touchdown, they're not going to get value at $4,300. They are averaging 20.8 points per game. They're a huge road favorite, 15 points. They're one though you could watch ownership. If people stay off of them, sure, spend up and try to save in another spot. But I try to stay away from that when they start getting that high of salary for a defense. There's a whole lot of variance in the defense position, and it's really hard to, you know, predict or project which ones are going to do the best. But they have 2 out of the 4 weeks they have been in the winning Millie Maker contest, and like I said, they're scoring 20 points a game. Excuse me. And lastly, Tennessee. They're 3,000. I think this is kind of a sneaky home favorite. They're the lowest, yeah, their lowest total on the board at 38.5 points. Playing Buffalo. Josh Allen has not been cleared from, let's make sure, he hadn't been cleared a couple hours ago, which means Barkley. Said he logged a full practice Friday, but is considered questionable. Allen still needs to be cleared to play in the game. That's no sure thing at this stage. Though Coach Sean McDermott says he's comfortable starting Allen even ahead of the team's Week 6 bye should the quarterback gain clearance from the concussion protocol. So that's one to watch. I'll be talking about that tomorrow in my lineup building video. Um, but I definitely like Tennessee if he's out. And I still would consider them if he was in there because he can turn the ball over. Um, but the Tennessee's scoring 10.8 points per game, and like I said, they're the lowest total on the board at 38.5 points. So I think that's a real sneaky pick, and I don't think there'll be much ownership on Tennessee. So these are the 5 defensive that special teams that I'm going to target in Week 5: Philadelphia, the Chargers, the Bears, New England, and Tennessee. So tomorrow, or Saturday, I'm going to be putting all of this together. All the research I've done this past week, I'm going to put it all together. I'm going to show you how I build lineups. I'm going to tell you that I took the players that I developed, the quarterback, wide receiver, running back, that I did on my previous videos. I'm taking all those. I'll put them in an optimizer. I'll show you a couple that the optimizer spit out. I'll share with you some of the ones that I have and why. And I'll show you how I look at ownership. There should be some better projected ownership numbers tomorrow. And we'll put it all together and build some winning lineups this Sunday. I want to thank you for joining me. Please hit that like button, the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you get notified when I do post my next video. I appreciate you being here. If you feel like dropping some comments below, please do. I've had some nice comments from some guys. I really appreciate the encouraging words. And I will be back tomorrow with the lineup building video. Have a good evening. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports. Have a good evening.